Houses for less than a used car. $5,000 for a 3-bedroom home. $10,000 for an entire property. Sounds like the deal of a lifetime, right? But here's what the real estate listings aren't showing you. The reason these houses are so cheap isn't because you've discovered some hidden gem. It's because something is so fundamentally wrong with these towns that properties have become literally worthless. I've analyzed the data, talked to locals, and researched the dark history of these places. And what I found is disturbing. We are talking about environmental disasters, economic collapse, rampant crime, and towns that are literally dying. These aren't opportunities, they're warnings. And if you buy one of these houses without understanding why they're so cheap, you could be making the worst financial decision of your life. Here are 15 US towns where houses cost less than a car, and the dark reasons locals say you should stay far away. Why are these houses so cheap? Before we dive into specific towns, you need to understand the economics of how a house can cost less than a Toyota Camry. Real estate is worth what someone is willing to pay for it. When you see houses selling for $5,000 or $10,000, that means nobody wants them. And I mean nobody. These aren't fixer-uppers in up-and-coming neighborhoods. These are properties in towns experiencing complete systemic failure. We are talking about environmental contamination that makes the land literally toxic. Economic collapse so severe that there are no jobs and no future. Crime rates so high that living there is genuinely dangerous. Infrastructure failure where basic services like water and electricity are unreliable. Population exodus so extreme that entire neighborhoods sit abandoned. When you buy a house for $5,000, you're not getting a deal. You're inheriting a liability. Because the hidden costs, contamination cleanup, sky-high insurance, property taxes on worthless land, inability to ever sell, will bankrupt you. Banks often won't even give mortgages on these properties because they know they're worthless. That's why they're cash-only sales. The financial system has already written these places off. The locals who are trying to sell know something you don't. They're trying to escape before things get even worse. And they're hoping some outsider sees the cheap price and doesn't ask questions. But we are going to ask those questions. And the answers are disturbing. Let's start with number 15 and count down to the town with the darkest story of all. At number 15, Prichard, Alabama. Prichard is a small city just outside Mobile, Alabama, where houses regularly sell for $5,000 to $15,000. You can buy an entire house for the price of a used Honda Civic. Here's the dark reason. Prichard is one of the most economically devastated cities in America with a murder rate that rivals war zones. The city filed for bankruptcy in 1999 and has never really recovered. The poverty rate is 40%. Nearly half the population lives in poverty. The median household income is just $25,000. But the real issue is crime. Prichard has one of the highest murder rates per capita in the entire United States. We're talking about a small city of 20,000 people with 20 to 30 murders per year. That's a rate comparable to some of the most dangerous cities in Latin America. Property crime is epidemic. Car theft, burglaries, and robberies are daily occurrences. Many residents have simply abandoned their homes and left, unwilling to risk their lives for worthless property. The infrastructure is crumbling. The city can barely afford basic services. Streets are in terrible condition. The school system is failing catastrophically. One former resident posted, "I inherited a house in Prichard. Tried to sell it for $10,000. No buyers. Tried $5,000. Still nothing. Finally just walked away and let the city take it." Nobody wants property there because living there is genuinely dangerous. When you can't give houses away for $5,000, that tells you everything about how bad things really are. Prichard isn't cheap. It's worthless because it's unlivable. At number 14, Cairo, Illinois. Cairo sits at the confluence of the Mississippi and Ohio rivers, and houses here sell for as little as $3,000 to $8,000. Entire buildings for less than a motorcycle. The dark reason. Cairo is a ghost town experiencing one of the most severe population collapses in American history. Cairo peaked at 15,000 residents in 1920. Today, fewer than 1,700 people remain. That's a 90% population loss. The town is literally dying. The downtown is almost entirely abandoned. Buildings are boarded up, collapsing, or burned out. Entire blocks sit empty with no economic activity whatsoever. The racial tensions and violence of the 1960s and 70s destroyed Cairo's economy and drove businesses out permanently. The town never recovered and has been in freefall ever since. The flood risk is severe. Cairo requires extensive levee systems to prevent catastrophic flooding. Insurance is expensive when you can even get it. There are virtually no jobs, no grocery stores, no basic services. The few people who remain are mostly elderly residents who can't afford to leave. The infrastructure is failing. Many buildings lack running water or functional utilities. The town government is broke and can barely provide any services. One visitor described it: Cairo looks like a movie set for a post-apocalyptic film. It's genuinely eerie. Buildings are collapsing into themselves. There's almost nobody around. It's like everyone just left and never came back. You couldn't pay most people to live in Cairo. The $3,000 houses aren't deals. They're reminders of a town that's already dead but hasn't been officially buried yet. At number 13, East St. Louis, Illinois. East St. Louis has properties selling for $2,000 to $10,000, and sometimes homes are literally given away or abandoned. The dark reason: East St. Louis is one of the most dangerous and economically collapsed cities in America. The city has lost over 60% of its population since 1950, dropping from 82,000 to barely 18,000 today. And those who remain are trapped in extreme poverty and violence. East St. Louis consistently ranks as one of the most dangerous cities in America. The violent crime rate is over 10 times the national average. We are talking about murders, aggravated assaults, and robberies happening constantly. The poverty rate is 43%, nearly half the population. The median household income is just $23,000. Unemployment is chronically high. The city is essentially bankrupt. Basic services like garbage collection, street maintenance, and police protection are severely limited. Many areas look like abandoned war zones. The school district is one of the worst performing in Illinois, which itself has some of the most troubled schools in America. Environmental contamination from decades of industrial activity has left parts of the city toxic. Lead paint, soil contamination, and industrial waste are widespread. One person who bought property there said, "Bought a house for $5,000 thinking I'd flip it. Couldn't even give it away. The neighborhood was so dangerous I was afraid to work on it. Lost everything I put into it and just walked away." East St. Louis isn't cheap. It's dangerous, toxic, and dying. The prices reflect a city that most of America has given up on. At number 12, Flint, Michigan. Yes, that Flint. Houses in many neighborhoods sell for $1,000 to $15,000. You can buy a house for less than a used laptop. The dark reason: the Flint water crisis poisoned an entire city, and the effects are still being felt today. Starting in 2014, Flint's water supply was contaminated with lead, poisoning thousands of residents. Children have permanent brain damage. Adults have chronic health problems. The trust in government is completely destroyed. While officials claim the water is now safe, many residents still don't trust it. Lead pipes are still being replaced, years behind schedule. And the damage has already been done. The population has collapsed. Flint has lost over half its population since 1960, dropping from 200,000 to under 80,000. The economic base, General Motors, has dramatically downsized. The poverty rate is 38%. The median household income is just $31,000. Violent crime rates are over double the national average. Properties that once sold for $80,000 or $100,000 now sell for $10,000 or less. But even at those prices, buyers are scarce because who wants to live in a city famous for poisoning its own residents? The school system is struggling. Healthcare is limited. Job opportunities are virtually non-existent outside of low-wage service work. One former resident shared, "I own a house in Flint that I bought for $65,000 in 2005. By 2020, it was worth maybe $15,000. I sold it for $12,000 and was happy to get out. Nobody wants to raise a family in a city that poisoned its children." Flint's cheap houses come with the knowledge that the city failed its residents in the worst way possible. That's not a legacy anyone wants to buy into. At number 11, Gary, Indiana. Gary has hundreds of properties selling for $1,000 to $10,000. The city literally has more houses than people who want to live there. The dark reason: Gary is experiencing urban decay so severe it looks like a city that was bombed and then abandoned. Gary has lost 60% of its population since 1960. Over 13,000 structures, roughly 1 in 5 buildings, sit abandoned and rotting. Entire neighborhoods are ghost towns with no residents whatsoever. The crime rate is catastrophic. Gary routinely ranks in the top 10 most dangerous cities in America. Violent crime is over 3 times the national average. Murders, carjackings, and robberies are daily occurrences. The economic base, the steel industry, is dead. US Steel still operates, but employs a fraction of what it once did. There are no jobs and no economic future. The poverty rate is 33%. Schools are failing. Infrastructure is crumbling. The tax base has collapsed so severely the city can barely provide police, fire, or sanitation services. Many homes have been stripped of copper wiring, plumbing, and anything of value. Squatters occupy abandoned properties. Arson is common. People burn buildings for insurance money or just to eliminate blight. The environmental contamination from decades of steel production is severe. Soil contamination, air quality issues, and industrial waste are widespread. One person who bought property said, "Bought 2 houses in Gary for $3,000 total thinking I'd rent them out. Both were broken into and stripped before I could even repair them. Lost all my investment. Gary isn't a city anymore, it's an open-air ruin." Gary's cheap houses aren't opportunities. They're evidence of one of America's most catastrophic urban failures. At number 10, Detroit, Michigan. Detroit has entire neighborhoods where houses sell for $500 to $5,000. $500 for a house. Less than a used iPhone. The dark reason: Detroit went bankrupt, the largest municipal bankruptcy in US history, and entire sections of the city were essentially abandoned. Detroit lost 60% of its population, dropping from 1.8 million in 1950 to just 620,000 today. Over 1 million people left. Entire neighborhoods were depopulated. The city has over 70,000 abandoned structures. 70,000. That's more abandoned buildings than most cities have total buildings. In the worst neighborhoods, houses aren't just cheap, they're liabilities. Property taxes on a $500 house can be $3,000 per year. The city charges you more in taxes than the property is worth. Crime in these abandoned areas is severe. With no neighbors and no police presence, these properties are targets for stripping, squatting, and criminal activity. Many cheap properties have back taxes exceeding their value. When you buy them, you inherit that debt. People have bought $1,000 houses only to discover they owe $10,000 in back taxes and liens. The infrastructure in these neighborhoods has failed. Water service is unreliable. Streetlights don't work. Roads are potholed beyond repair. The city has essentially given up on these areas. Environmental issues are common: lead paint, asbestos, contaminated soil from industrial dumping. One investor said, "Bought 10 houses in Detroit for $20,000 total. Spent $50,000 fixing them up. Couldn't rent them because nobody wants to live there. Couldn't sell them. Lost everything." Detroit's cheap houses are traps. Detroit's downtown might be reviving, but the vast majority of the city remains a disaster. Those $500 houses represent the scale of that disaster. At number 9, Saginaw, Michigan. Opportunities are virtually non-existent. The tax burden is high relative to property values. You can buy a house for $8,000 and pay $2,000 per year in property taxes. The math doesn't work. One resident said, "I've lived in Saginaw my whole life. I own my house outright and I still can't wait to leave. The crime is out of control. Shootings every week. People breaking into houses constantly." The cheap property value Saginaw has houses regularly selling for $5,000 to $12,000 in large parts of the city. The dark reason: Saginaw has one of the highest violent crime rates in America combined with extreme poverty and economic collapse. Saginaw's population has dropped by 50% since 1960. The auto industry and manufacturing base that sustained the city are gone and never coming back. The crime rate is shocking. Saginaw consistently ranks in the top 20 most dangerous cities in America. The violent crime rate is over 4 times the national average. The poverty rate is 33%. The median household income is just $32,000. Over 1/3 of residents live in poverty. Large sections of Saginaw look like war zones. Abandoned buildings are everywhere. Arson is common. Many properties have been stripped of anything valuable. The school system is one of the worst in Michigan. Educational outcomes are terrible, and the graduation rate is well below state averages. Job opportunities are extremely limited. Most employment is low-wage service work or government jobs. Career ops tell the whole story. Saginaw's houses are cheap because living there means accepting danger, poverty, and no future. That's not a trade-off most people will make. At number 8, Birmingham, Alabama. Birmingham has entire neighborhoods where houses sell for $8,000 to $20,000. Prices lower than a decent used car. The dark reason: Birmingham is experiencing severe population decline, economic stagnation, and crime rates that make large parts of the city genuinely dangerous. Birmingham has lost over 40% of its population since 1960. The industrial base that built the city, steel and manufacturing, is gone. What remains is poverty and violence. Birmingham has one of the highest murder rates in America. The city regularly ranks in the top 10 most dangerous cities. Violent crime is concentrated in certain neighborhoods, but it's widespread enough to affect the entire city. The poverty rate is 26%. Large sections of the city are economically depressed with no jobs, failing schools, and crumbling infrastructure. Many cheap properties are in areas where crime is so bad that police response times are terrible, and residents are essentially on their own. The school system is struggling severely. Birmingham city schools consistently underperform state averages and face chronic funding issues. The tax base has collapsed in many areas, meaning city services are inadequate. Street maintenance, sanitation, and basic infrastructure are deteriorating. Properties that were worth $100,000 20 years ago now sell for $15,000. And even at those prices, many sit on the market for months or years with no buyers. One person who bought investment property said, "Bought 3 houses in Birmingham thinking I'd rent them out. Tenants destroyed them. Couldn't find new renters. Neighborhood got worse. Sold all 3 at a massive loss just to get out." Birmingham's cheap houses reflect a city in serious decline. The low prices aren't opportunities, they're warnings. At number 7, Bessemer, Alabama. Bessemer, a city just outside Birmingham, has houses selling for as little as $2,000 to $10,000. The dark reason: Bessemer combines extreme poverty, high crime, and economic devastation in a city that most of Alabama has forgotten. The poverty rate in Bessemer is 30%. The median household income is just $35,000. The city is one of the poorest in Alabama. The crime rate is severe. Bessemer consistently ranks among the most dangerous cities in Alabama. Violent crime, including murder, robbery, and assault, is far above state and national averages. The city's economy collapsed with the decline of the steel industry. There are virtually no good jobs. Most employment is low-wage retail or service work. Large portions of Bessemer are blighted. Abandoned buildings, vacant lots, and deteriorating infrastructure are everywhere. The school system is one of the worst performing in Alabama. Test scores are terrible, graduation rates are low, and resources are inadequate. Many properties are in such bad condition that they need complete rebuilding. A $5,000 house often needs $50,000 in repairs to be livable. City services are limited due to budget constraints. Police, fire, sanitation, and maintenance are all stretched thin. One local said, "Bessemer used to be a decent working-class city. Now it's just poverty and crime. Houses are cheap because nobody with options would choose to live here. The people who can leave do leave." Bessemer's ultra-cheap houses reflect a city that's been left behind by economic progress. Unless something dramatic changes, the decline will continue. At number 6, Youngstown, Ohio. Youngstown has hundreds of properties selling for $5,000 to $15,000, and some are literally given away through land bank programs. The dark reason: Youngstown is a Rust Belt city that experienced one of the most catastrophic economic collapses in American history. In 1977, Youngstown Sheet and Tube closed, eliminating 5,000 jobs in one day, an event known as Black Monday. This triggered a cascade of closures that destroyed the city's economy. Youngstown has lost over 60% of its population since 1960, dropping from 170,000 to barely 60,000 today. Over 100,000 people left. The city has over 4,000 abandoned structures. Entire neighborhoods have been demolished and returned to vacant lots. The city literally has more land than it needs for its current population. The crime rate is significantly above national averages. Property crime is rampant. Certain neighborhoods are controlled by drugs and gang activity. The poverty rate is 35%, one of the highest in Ohio. The median household income is just $32,000. Job opportunities are extremely limited. The steel mills are gone. Manufacturing is gone. What remains are low-wage service jobs and government work. The school system is troubled. Many schools are underfunded and underperforming. Property taxes remain high relative to values. You can buy a $10,000 house and pay $1,500 per year in taxes while the neighborhood continues to decline. One person who bought property said, "Bought a house in Youngstown for $8,000. Spent $30,000 fixing it up. Tried to sell for $40,000. Best offer I got was $25,000. Lost money and learned my lesson. Cheap houses in dying cities are financial suicide." Youngstown's cheap prices reflect a city that lost its economic reason for existing. The steel is gone, and it's never coming back. At number 5. Cleveland, Ohio. Cleveland has entire neighborhoods where houses sell for $10,000 to $25,000, less than a used pickup truck. The dark reason: Cleveland has lost over half its population and large sections of the city have been essentially abandoned to poverty and crime. Cleveland peaked at 915,000 residents in 1950. Today, barely 360,000. Over 500,000 people left. The economic base, manufacturing, is largely gone. The city has tens of thousands of abandoned properties. Neighborhoods on the east side are particularly devastated, with entire blocks sitting empty. Crime rates in these neighborhoods are severe. Cleveland consistently ranks among the most dangerous large cities in America. Violent crime is over 3 times the national average. The poverty rate is 32%, nearly 1/3 of residents. Many neighborhoods have poverty rates exceeding 50%. The school system is one of the most troubled in Ohio. Cleveland schools consistently underperform, and the district has faced takeovers and restructuring attempts. Properties in the worst neighborhoods are toxic assets. They generate no income, require constant maintenance, attract crime, and can never be sold. Many cheap houses have environmental issues: lead paint, asbestos, soil contamination from industrial activity. The tax structure in Ohio means property taxes remain high even as values collapse. You're paying taxes on what the property was worth, not what it's worth now. One investor described it: "Bought 20 properties in Cleveland thinking I'd create a rental empire. Nightmare. Tenants didn't pay. Houses were broken into. City fined me for code violations. Lost over $100,000. Cleveland's cheap houses are traps for out-of-town investors." Cleveland's cheap properties reflect massive sections of a once great city that have simply failed. The prices are warnings, not opportunities. At number 4. Memphis, Tennessee. Memphis has neighborhoods where houses sell for $15,000 to $30,000. Prices that seem unbelievable for a major American city. The dark reason: Memphis has become one of the most dangerous cities in America, and property values in high-crime areas have collapsed. Memphis recorded over 300 murders in 2023, a murder rate of about 46 per 100,000 residents. That's nearly 10 times the national average. The city rivals some of the most dangerous places in the world. Property crime is equally severe. Car thefts, robberies, and burglaries happen constantly. Memphis consistently ranks in the top 5 most dangerous cities in America. Large sections of Memphis are economically depressed. The poverty rate is 24%, and in some neighborhoods it exceeds 40%. The school system is troubled. Memphis City Schools merged with Shelby County Schools in a controversial reorganization, but outcomes remain poor. Houses selling for $20,000 are typically in neighborhoods where crime is so bad that living there is genuinely dangerous. Gunshots are common. Drug activity is open. Police response is often slow. Many properties need extensive repairs. A $20,000 house often needs $40,000 in work to be safely habitable. Insurance costs are high. Getting homeowners insurance in high-crime areas of Memphis is expensive or sometimes impossible. Property values continue to decline in these areas. A $25,000 house today might be worth $15,000 in 2 years as the neighborhood continues to deteriorate. One resident said, "I've lived in Memphis for 30 years and watched neighborhoods completely collapse. Houses that families raised kids in are now crack houses selling for nothing. It's heartbreaking, but the crime has made entire areas unlivable." Memphis's cheap houses are in war zones. The prices reflect the danger, and no amount of money is worth risking your life. At number 3. St. Louis, Missouri. St. Louis has numerous neighborhoods where houses sell for $5,000 to $20,000, sometimes less than a motorcycle. The dark reason: St. Louis has the highest murder rate of any major American city, and entire neighborhoods have been abandoned to violence and decay. St. Louis consistently ranks as the most dangerous city in America. The murder rate is astronomical, over 60 per 100,000 residents in the city proper. That's 12 times the national average. The city has lost 65% of its population since 1950, dropping from 850,000 to barely 280,000. Over 500,000 people fled. North St. Louis in particular looks like a city that was bombed. Entire blocks are empty. Buildings are burned out or collapsing. It looks like a war zone. The city has over 25,000 vacant properties. 25,000. The city literally cannot maintain or demolish buildings fast enough. Properties in the worst areas are essentially worthless. They can't be insured. They can't be rented safely. They can't be sold. They're financial black holes. The poverty rate in St. Louis is 24%, but in the most affected neighborhoods it's over 50%. Economic opportunity is non-existent. The school system is troubled. St. Louis public schools lost accreditation in the past and continue to struggle. Many cheap properties have extensive code violations, back taxes, and liens that exceed their value. One person who tried to invest said, "Bought 5 houses in North St. Louis for $25,000 total. 2 were burned by arsonists. 3 were stripped of everything valuable. Lost my entire investment and got nothing. St. Louis' cheap houses destroyed me financially." St. Louis' ultra-cheap properties are in areas that have experienced complete societal breakdown. The prices reflect that terrifying reality. At number 2, Baltimore, Maryland. Baltimore has entire neighborhoods where houses sell for $1,000 to $15,000. $1,000 for a row house in a major American city. The dark reason: Baltimore has catastrophic crime rates, extreme poverty, and neighborhoods that have been completely abandoned. Baltimore has over 300 murders per year in a city of 575,000 people, a murder rate over 50 per 100,000. That's 10 times the national average and makes Baltimore one of the most dangerous cities on earth. The city has lost 35% of its population since 1950. Entire neighborhoods have been depopulated. West Baltimore in particular looks post-apocalyptic. Baltimore has over 15,000 vacant properties. The city tears down hundreds of abandoned buildings per year but can't keep up with the decay. The poverty rate is 21%, but in the worst neighborhoods it exceeds 40%. Economic opportunity is severely limited outside of a few gentrifying areas. Properties selling for $1,000 to $5,000 are in areas where you cannot safely live. Drug activity is open and constant. Violence is routine. Police are overwhelmed and response times are terrible. Many row houses have been stripped of copper, plumbing, and fixtures. They need complete rebuilding, which costs $80,000 to $150,000, far more than they're worth even after renovation. The tax structure in Baltimore means you pay high property taxes even on worthless properties. The city charges you based on assessed value, not market value. Environmental contamination is widespread. Lead paint, asbestos, and industrial pollution are common in these old properties. One investor described it: bought 10 row houses in Baltimore for $30,000 total. All in terrible neighborhoods. Couldn't safely work on them. Couldn't rent them. Couldn't sell them. Just walked away and let the city take them. Worst financial decision of my life. Baltimore's dollar houses aren't opportunities. They're evidence of urban failure so complete that property has lost all value. And at number 1, Camden, New Jersey. Camden, where houses sell for as little as $1,000 to $10,000, and the city is so desperate to offload properties they sometimes just give them away. The dark reason: Camden is consistently ranked as one of the most dangerous cities in America, with poverty and crime so severe that the city is essentially a failed state. Camden has a violent crime rate over 5 times the national average. The murder rate, assault rate, and robbery rate are all catastrophic. Living in Camden means accepting danger as a daily reality. The poverty rate is 37%, over 1/3 of residents. The median household income is just $29,000. Camden is one of the poorest cities in America. Camden has lost 40% of its population since 1950. Those who remain are largely trapped by poverty and inability to leave. The city is so broke that it dissolved its police department in 2013 and created a county force to save money. Basic city services are inadequate. The school system is one of the worst in New Jersey. Graduation rates are terrible. Test scores are among the lowest in the state. Entire blocks are abandoned. Buildings are burned out, collapsed, or stripped. The city looks like a disaster zone. Properties selling for $5,000 are in neighborhoods where crime is so severe that you risk your life being there. Drug dealing is open. Shootings are common. It's genuinely dangerous. Many properties have environmental contamination, structural damage, and code violations that would cost more to fix than the property could ever be worth. The city has given up on large sections of itself. They've essentially written off entire neighborhoods as unsalvageable. One person said it best, "Camden houses aren't cheap, they're worthless." The city is in complete failure. Nobody should buy property there unless they have no other options. It's one of the saddest, most dangerous places in America. Camden's dollar houses represent the darkest outcome of urban decay. When a city has failed so completely that property has no value, that's Camden. So there you have it. 15 American towns and cities where houses cost less than a car, and the genuinely dark reasons why. Notice the pattern. Every single place on this list is experiencing extreme poverty, catastrophic crime, economic collapse, environmental disaster, or complete abandonment. These aren't hidden gems, they're warnings. When a house costs $5,000, that's not because you've discovered an investment opportunity. It's because something is so fundamentally wrong that the property has become a liability rather than an asset. The locals trying to sell these houses know what you don't. The hidden costs will destroy you. Property taxes that exceed the home's value. Crime that makes it impossible to live safely. Repairs that cost 10 times what you paid. Inability to ever sell or rent the property. Environmental contamination that makes the land toxic. And here's the truly dark part. Many of these towns are in death spirals they'll never escape. The jobs are gone and not coming back. The population is leaving and not returning. The tax base is collapsing. The infrastructure is failing. Buying a cheap house in one of these places doesn't make you a savvy investor. It makes you the person left holding the bag when everyone else escaped. Could some of these places turn around? Theoretically, yes. But after decades of decline, betting on a turnaround is like betting on winning the lottery. It's possible, but incredibly unlikely. If you're considering buying ultra-cheap property, ask yourself, why is it so cheap? What do the locals know that I don't? Can I safely live there? Can I ever sell it? What are the hidden costs? Because in every case on this list, the hidden costs far exceed the purchase price. There are ways to invest in real estate successfully. But buying $5,000 houses in failed cities isn't one of them. It's how you lose money while thinking you're getting a deal. If you found this video valuable, smash that subscribe button. I reveal the truth about real estate, cities, and where to actually build wealth in America. Have you bought property in any of these places? What was your experience? Drop it in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Remember, if something seems too good to be true, it definitely is. And houses cheaper than cars are the definition of too good to be true.